My therapist asked why I never mentioned my twin sister. I thought I was an only child. I stared at the stack of childhood photos my mother had sent to Dr. Joyce for our session on family trauma. There I was at 5 years old wearing my favorite purple dress at my birthday party, and standing right next to me was another little girl in an identical purple dress with my exact same face. The girl had her arm around my shoulders, and we were both grinning at the camera with matching gap-toothed smiles. "I don't have a twin sister, and I never have," I said, but my voice came out as barely a whisper. Dr. Joyce spread out more photos across her mahogany desk. There were dozens of them showing me and this identical girl at different ages. First day of kindergarten with matching backpacks. Christmas morning in matching pajamas. A swimming pool party where we wore the same polka dot bathing suit. In every photo, this girl who looked exactly like me was right there beside me, and in every photo, I had absolutely no memory of her existing. "Your mother specifically mentioned Maria when she sent these, Doctor," Joyce said gently. "She said you two were inseparable until you were about 12. I picked up one of the photos with shaking hands. The girl definitely looked exactly like me, but I would remember having a twin sister. "This has to be some kind of mistake, or maybe these are doctored photos," I said. "My mother has been having memory issues lately, and maybe she's confused me with someone else's family." "Doctor." Joyce pulled out her tablet and showed me an email. "Lydia, your mother wrote very clearly about Maria. She said Maria was always the outgoing one while you were shy. She said Maria protected you from bullies and helped you with your homework." The email went on for 3 paragraphs describing our supposed relationship, but none of it rang even the smallest bell in my memory. I left therapy in a complete daze and drove straight to my mother's house without calling ahead. She opened the door and smiled like nothing was wrong. "Lydia, darling, what a nice surprise," she said, but her face changed when she saw my expression. I held up one of the photos Dr. Joyce had given me. "Who is this girl standing next to me in every single childhood photo?" My mother's face went completely white, and she gripped the doorframe for support. "You remember Maria?" she whispered with tears already forming in her eyes. "Mom, I don't remember anyone named Maria, and I need you to tell me what's going on right now." She led me into the living room and sat down heavily on the couch. "The doctor said you might remember her someday, but after so many years I thought it would never happen," my mother said. "You and Maria were inseparable from birth until the accident when you were 12. I felt my chest tightening with panic. "What accident?" My mother pulled out a photo album I'd never seen before, filled with hundreds of pictures of me and this identical girl. "There was a car accident on the way home from summer camp. Maria didn't make it, and you were in a coma for 3 weeks. When you woke up, you had no memory of her at all. The doctors said it was your mind's way of protecting itself from the trauma." Nothing she was saying made any sense to me. "Mom, if I had a twin sister who died, there would be records and death certificates and a grave somewhere." My mother stood up and walked to her desk where she pulled out a folder. Inside were documents that made my hands shake. A birth certificate for Maria Lynn Wick, born 3 minutes after me. Report cards from elementary school with both our names. Medical records showing vaccinations for twins. "We thought it would be better not to force you to remember," my mother said. "The psychiatrist said it could cause a complete mental breakdown if we pushed too hard." I spent the next 3 days searching through every corner of the internet for any trace of Maria Lynn Wick, who supposedly died when she was 12. There was no death certificate in the county records and no obituary in the newspaper archives from that year. The summer camp my mother mentioned had no record of any car accident involving campers. The more I searched, the more nothing made sense. Then late one night I found something that changed everything. There was a Maria Wick living in Portland right now who was exactly my age according to her Facebook profile. The woman in the profile picture had my face, but with shorter hair and a nose piercing I'd never gotten. Her bio said she worked as a graphic designer and had graduated from the same high school I attended. Her birthday was the same as mine down to the year. I scrolled through years of her posts with trembling fingers. There she was at places I recognized around Portland. There she was at restaurants I loved. Her most recent post from 3 days ago made my blood freeze. "You need to understand that I've been looking for you for 20 years, but you weren't ready to remember. Mom finally showed you the photos and now you're looking for me. I know because I'm watching you search for me right now, Lydia." My laptop screen flickered, and a video chat request popped up from Maria Wick. The accept button blinked green on my screen while my finger just hung there in the air. My whole body was shaking so bad I couldn't make myself click anything. The video chat request kept pinging every few seconds, and each sound made me jump. After what felt like forever but was probably 30 seconds, I grabbed my phone and took a screenshot of the request. Then I slammed my laptop shut without accepting or declining. My hands were still shaking as I picked up my phone and called Samir. "I know it's past midnight, but I need you to come over right now," I said when he picked up. He didn't even ask why, just said he'd be there in 20 minutes. I spent those 20 minutes pacing around my apartment and checking the locks on my doors twice. When Samir knocked, I almost jumped out of my skin even though I was expecting him. I pulled him inside and showed him everything on my phone since I was too scared to open my laptop again. The Facebook profile, the photos, that creepy message about her watching me search for her. "This is way beyond weird," Samir said after looking through everything twice. We need a plan before you talk to this person because something's really off here. He made us both coffee even though it was so late because neither of us was going to sleep anyway. We sat at my kitchen table making lists of what we knew for sure versus what people were claiming. First thing the next morning, I called Dr. Joyce's office the second they opened. The receptionist said she was booked, but when I said it was an emergency, she put me on hold. Dr. Joyce picked up and said she could fit me in that afternoon. When I got to her office, she had me tell her everything that happened since our last session. We need to set up safety rules before you make any contact with this person, she said. She wrote out a whole list of guidelines about only meeting in public places with lots of people around. She said I should always have someone with me and have backup plans to leave quickly. While I was sitting in Dr. Joyce's office, my phone kept buzzing with voicemails from my mother. 3 of them came through during the 50-minute session. Each message sounded more panicked than the one before, but she wouldn't say what she wanted to talk about. "We need to talk right now," was all she kept saying over and over. I didn't call her back because I needed to think clearly, and she was obviously going to make that impossible. That evening, Samir came back over, and we spread all the childhood photos across my dining room table. We went through them one by one with a magnifying glass app on his phone. In about half the photos, Maria's shadow went in a slightly different direction than mine. The lighting on her face didn't quite match the rest of the picture in some of them. "These ones were definitely edited," Samir said, pointing to 5 specific photos. But the other photos, especially the ones that looked like someone just snapped them without planning, seemed completely real. In those, Maria and I were tangled up together or making faces or doing something silly. Those couldn't have been faked unless someone was really, really good at photo editing. I opened Facebook on my phone and sent Maria a message saying I needed time to process everything. I suggested we could talk in a week when I'd had time to think. Within 2 minutes, she wrote back a long message about understanding, but how she'd already been waiting 20 years. She said she hoped I wouldn't make her wait much longer because every day apart was killing her. The message was desperate, but she didn't threaten me or anything. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I had dreams about a girl with my face. In one dream, she was underwater calling my name, and I was reaching down trying to grab her hand. The water kept getting deeper, and her voice got quieter until I couldn't hear her anymore. I woke up gasping for air like I'd been the one drowning. The next day at work, I kept spacing out and making stupid mistakes. Samir had to cover for me when our boss asked why I'd sent the wrong files to a client. "She's dealing with a family emergency," Samir told him. Our boss said I should take some personal time if I needed it. I put in a request for 3 days off, and he approved it right away without asking questions. The next morning, I drove to the public library downtown. The librarian showed me how to use their newspaper archive system. I searched through every single newspaper from that whole summer 20 years ago. There was nothing about any car accident with twins or any accident at a summer camp, but I did find one tiny article about child welfare services investigating a local summer camp. The article didn't give many details, just that there were allegations of inadequate supervision. I texted Maria asking for proof she was real, and not just someone who found my photos online somewhere. 20 minutes later, she sent me a photo of a birth certificate. It showed Maria Lynn Wick, born 3 minutes after me at the same hospital where I was born. The document had an official raised seal, and everything looked completely real. I needed to know if this birth certificate was real, so I called the hospital where Maria and I were supposedly born. The first person transferred me to medical records, then they sent me to administration, then to some other department I didn't catch the name of. Finally, a woman in records picked up and I explained what I needed. She typed on her keyboard for what felt like forever before telling me that yes, twins were born to Mrs. Wick on that date, but she couldn't give me any other information without proper authorization forms. My chest got so tight I could barely breathe after I hung up. The next morning, my mother showed up at my apartment without calling first, and she looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was messy and her clothes were wrinkled, and she had dark circles under her eyes. She pushed past me into my living room and started begging me to stop looking into the past, saying some things were better left buried and that I didn't understand what I was doing. I pulled out the copy of Maria's birth certificate and held it up in front of her face. She took one look at it and completely broke down, sobbing so hard she couldn't even talk, but she still wouldn't tell me what really happened. After she left, I started shaking and couldn't stop, my heart racing so fast I thought I might pass out. I called Dr. Joyce's emergency line, and she answered on the 3rd ring, talking me through breathing exercises while I sat on my bathroom floor. She kept reminding me that whatever the truth was, I was safe now and in control of how I moved forward. We set up daily sessions for the whole next week before I finally stopped shaking enough to stand up. Samir came over that afternoon and told me his sister Layla worked at the county records office and might be able to help. He called her right there, and she agreed to meet us the next day to show me how to search public records without breaking any rules. She said dependency court records were usually sealed, but sometimes the basic dockets were public, and that would be a good place to start looking. 3 days later, I finally worked up the courage to accept Maria's video call request, but only if Samir could sit with me while we talked. My laptop rang, and when I clicked accept, her face filled the screen, and it was exactly like looking at myself in a mirror, except she had shorter hair and that nose piercing. She immediately started crying, Not just tears, but full sobbing, saying she'd dreamed about this moment since she was 12 years old. Through her tears, she told me our mother gave her up to foster care after the accident, telling everyone she died so no one would ask questions. She said she aged out of the system when she turned 18 and had been searching for me ever since, showing me photos from different foster families and documents from social services, though she admitted some of her memories were fuzzy from trauma. The call got too intense when she couldn't stop crying, and we agreed to talk again the next day. After she hung up, Samir pointed out that her story didn't completely make sense. Like, how did she know to watch my Facebook if she supposedly didn't know where I was all these years? I agreed something felt off, even though seeing her had shaken me to my core. The next morning, I hired Tariq Mahmood, a private investigator Samir knew from his old job, to check out Maria's background. Tariq said he'd run basic checks on her employment history, past addresses, and any criminal records, but he warned me that foster care kids often had gaps in their official records that made them hard to trace. A few days later, I went to see Dr. Joyce for one of our daily sessions, and she suggested we try guided meditation to see if I could access any buried memories from childhood. I lay on her couch while she talked me through relaxation techniques, and suddenly I got this flash of two girls in purple dresses fighting over a toy, both of them yelling and grabbing at it. I couldn't tell if it was a real memory or just my brain making up what it thought I wanted to see, but it felt so vivid I started crying. That evening, Layla called with news that made my hands shake. She'd found a sealed juvenile case file from 20 years ago with our family name on it, filed exactly 2 weeks after the date my mother said the accident happened. She couldn't open the file, but she gave me the case number and told me I'd need to hire a lawyer who specialized in unsealing old child welfare records if I wanted to know what was inside. That night, my mother sent me an email with 20 gigabytes of old home videos she'd been digitizing for months. I downloaded them one by one and started watching myself at birthday parties and Christmas mornings and random afternoons in our backyard. Every single video showed me playing alone or with neighborhood kids, but never with anyone who looked like me. Samir came over with takeout, and we watched them together on my laptop, him pointing out weird jump cuts in the middle of scenes where the camera would jerk or the lighting would change suddenly. In one video from my 10th birthday party, I was blowing out candles on a cake that said, "Happy Birthday, Girls," but the S at the end looked freshly added with different frosting. We found at least 15 videos with these obvious edits where chunks of footage had been cut out or spliced together awkwardly. The next morning, I met with Yasmin Khalil in her downtown office filled with law books and framed diplomas. She reviewed the case number Layla had found and explained that juvenile dependency records were sealed to protect minors, but courts could unseal them if you showed good cause like needing medical history or resolving identity issues. She pulled out forms and started filling them out while explaining the process could take 3 to 6 months depending on the court's schedule and whether anyone objected to the unsealing. She warned me that even if we got access, parts might be blacked out to protect other children mentioned in the records. I signed the papers and wrote her a check for the retainer fee, my hands only shaking a little bit. 2 days later, Maria sent me a manila envelope through regular mail containing 37 photos from her time in foster care. Each photo showed her at different ages with different families, always standing slightly apart from the group like she didn't quite belong. In every picture, her eyes looked empty and lost in a way that made my chest hurt because I recognized that exact expression from my own face in photos after Dad left. One photo from when she was 13 had writing on the back in blue pen that said, "Maria, age 13, still asking about her sister Lydia every single day." Another showed her at maybe 15 with a black eye she'd tried to cover with makeup. The foster families looked nice enough, but Maria looked broken in every single image. Tariq called me that afternoon with his preliminary findings about Maria's background. Her employment history at 3 different design firms checked out completely with good references from each job. She had no criminal record, not even a parking ticket, and her credit was decent for someone who grew up in foster care. But he'd found something weird in her address history. 3 different apartments in Portland over 5 years, and each one was within 2 miles of where I lived. She'd moved to be near me each time I'd moved, following me around the city like a ghost I didn't know existed. The proximity felt intentional and creepy, but also desperately sad. I drove to my mother's house that evening without calling first, and knocked until she answered. I held up Layla's case number written on a piece of paper and watched her face crumble. She grabbed the door frame and started talking fast about how there was a custody dispute after the accident, but she was just trying to protect me from a dangerous situation. She claimed Maria had become violent after her head injury, attacking other kids at camp and threatening counselors, that the state had to remove her for everyone's safety. But her story kept changing even as she told it, first saying Maria hit another camper, then saying she threatened them, then saying she just had violent outbursts. The more she talked, the less sense she made. The next day, Dr. Joyce helped me process everything during our session, pointing out how my mother's story shifted every time she told it. She suggested my mother might have her own mental health issues, or might be covering up something much worse than what she was admitting. She recommended I focus on facts that could be verified through documents rather than believing anyone's version of events. We practiced breathing exercises when I started hyperventilating, thinking about 20 years of lies. That night, I had another video call with Maria, where I told her what our mother said about her being dangerous after the accident. Maria laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound, more like broken glass. She said our mother always painted her as the bad twin even before the accident, that she was the problem child who caused trouble while I was the perfect daughter. She claimed the real reason she got removed was because she told a camp counselor about our mother hitting us with wooden spoons and leaving bruises where clothes would cover them. She said I'd blocked it out even before my head injury, but she remembered everything. I asked Samir to contact his friend Omar, who worked in digital forensics, to examine all the photos I had. Omar came over with his laptop and special software, scanning each image and checking the metadata. He confirmed that most of the childhood photos from my mother had been digitally edited, some recently with modern software and others years ago with older programs. The Facebook photos Maria sent looked completely unedited with consistent metadata. The ones my mother gave Dr. Joyce showed clear signs of manipulation with Maria, removed from some and added to others. I decided to drive to the old summer camp location 2 hours outside Portland, which had been converted to a state park 15 years ago. The ranger station still had boxes of old records and photos in their storage room from when it was Camp Wildwood. The ranger, an older guy who'd worked there for 30 years, let me look through the archives. I found a group photo from the summer we were 12, and there we were. 2 identical girls standing on opposite sides of the group, like we were avoiding each other. The ranger saw me staring at the photo and mentioned he remembered that particular summer because it was the only time Child Protective Services had shown up to remove a camper. He didn't remember all the details, but said it was a huge deal with the mother screaming and fighting the social workers in the parking lot while the kid was put in a state van. 3 days after finding that old camp photo, Yasmin called while I was making breakfast. She said the judge would hear our petition next week and sounded really hopeful about it. She explained we had a strong case for needing family medical history and warned me some parts might be blacked out to protect other kids who were there. I thanked her and hung up, then noticed my phone buzzing with messages from Maria. She'd started sending me texts every morning about things she remembered from when we were kids. One message said, I used to be scared of thunder and she'd hold my hand during storms. Another talked about our secret language we made up using backwards words. She wrote about how we promised to never live apart when we grew up. Reading her messages made my skin feel weird, like something was trying to push through from inside my brain. Some details felt almost familiar, but I couldn't grab onto them fully. Dr. Nadia Hassan called that same afternoon and agreed to meet with me at her office downtown. She couldn't tell me much without the right paperwork, but she sat across from me in her white coat and confirmed she treated a 12-year-old with my exact name for memory loss after trauma. She pulled out some forms and suggested I sign releases to get my medical records the proper way. I signed everything she gave me right there in her office, my hand shaking as I wrote my name over and over. The wait for those records felt endless, and during those nights I started having dreams that felt too real to be just dreams. In one, I was hiding under a bed with another girl while someone screamed above us, throwing things that crashed against walls. I woke up sweating and knew deep in my bones that this one actually happened. Samir came over the next weekend with a big whiteboard and colored markers. We spent hours making a timeline of everything we knew was true versus what people claimed. The facts we could prove were pretty thin, but they all pointed the same direction. Maria existed. Something bad happened when we were 12, and my mother had been lying about all of it. We put green dots next to verified facts like the birth certificate and camp photo, yellow dots next to things that seemed likely, and red dots next to obvious lies. The board ended up mostly red on my mother's side. 2 days later, Dr. Joyce called me into her office for an unscheduled session. My mother had been calling her, trying to get her to convince me to stop digging into the past. Dr. Joyce kept her professional boundaries and didn't tell my mother anything about our sessions, but she wanted me to know about the calls. We talked about how my mother trying to control everything was actually proving she had something big to hide. The court date came faster than I expected, and I wore my only suit to the courthouse. Yasmin stood in front of the judge and explained why I needed to see these records to understand my own history and medical background. The state lawyer didn't fight it, and the judge granted us partial access to everything that didn't name other kids or foster families. While we waited for the court to prepare the documents, Maria and I finally agreed to meet face-to-face at a coffee shop downtown. Walking through the door and seeing her sitting at a corner table made my legs feel like water. She stood up when she saw me, and we just stared at each other for what felt like forever. She moved exactly like me, tapped her fingers on the table the same way I do when I'm nervous, even ordered the exact same drink I always get. We sat across from each other with tears running down both our faces, not even trying to wipe them away. After a few minutes of just looking at each other, Maria rolled up her sleeve and showed me a scar on her left palm. She asked if I had one too, and I turned my hand over to show her the identical mark in the exact same spot. The second I saw both scars together, a memory hit me like a punch to the stomach. We were 7 years old in the backyard, making a blood sister pact with a piece of broken glass we found behind the garage. We pressed our cut palms together and swore to always protect each other no matter what. The memory was so clear I could smell the grass and feel the sting of the cut. Maria saw my face change and grabbed my hand across the table, both of us crying harder now. A week later, Yasmin called to say the records were ready and asked me to come to her office. She helped me read through the stack of papers, explaining the legal language when I got confused. The documents painted a picture that made my stomach hurt. Camp counselors had noticed bruises on both Maria and me in places that clothes usually covered. They'd reported it to Child Protective Services, who investigated and found evidence of physical abuse. The records showed that Maria and I were both removed from our mother's custody initially. Maria went into foster care, but I was returned to our mother after I hit my head and lost my memory. The social worker wrote that I couldn't remember any abuse and seemed happy with our mother, so they decided not to traumatize me further by keeping me in foster care. Maria remembered everything, though, and she stayed in the system to keep her safe. The final page had a judge's signature, making it all official 20 years ago. Yasmin helped me turn to the next page in the file, and there it was, a psychological evaluation from 20 years ago with my name at the top. The evaluator wrote that I showed clear signs of trauma-induced dissociative amnesia after hitting my head at camp and couldn't remember any abuse or even having a sister. They recommended I stay with our mother since forcing memories could cause serious psychological harm, while Maria needed immediate protection and placement in foster care. My hands shook so bad I dropped the papers all over Yasmin's office floor. I grabbed my phone and called my mother, telling her I was coming over right now with the court documents and she better have answers ready. The drive to her house took 20 minutes but felt like hours, with my mind racing through everything I'd just learned. She opened the door before I could knock, and I could see she'd been crying for hours, her face all puffy and red. I shoved the custody papers at her chest and watched her stumble backward into the living room. She sat down hard on the couch and finally started talking, really talking this time. She told me about her mental health crisis when we were 12, how she'd hurt both of us during what she now knows was a bipolar episode, how child services took us both away at first. When I hit my head at camp and lost my memories, the court let her have me back since I couldn't remember the bad stuff and seemed happy with her. She'd been in therapy and on medication ever since, 20 years of treatment trying to deal with what she'd done. She created the car accident story because it was easier than admitting she'd lost Maria for hurting us. I called Maria right there in front of my mother and asked her to meet me at Dr. Joyce's office the next morning because we needed professional help to process this mess. Maria agreed immediately and said she'd been waiting 20 years for the truth to come out. The next morning, Dr. Joyce cleared her whole schedule when she saw both of us in her waiting room together. We sat on opposite ends of her couch at first, but by the end of the session we were holding hands and crying about everything we'd lost. Dr. Joyce helped us understand that our mother had also been sick and traumatized, but that didn't make the lies okay or erase the damage done. Over the next few days, memories started coming back in pieces, like a dam breaking slowly. I remembered Maria standing between me and our mother during one of her rage episodes, taking the hits meant for me. I remembered the day social workers came to the camp and how confused I was when they separated us. I remembered Maria screaming my name as they drove her away in a different car. Each memory hurt, but also felt like finding a piece of myself I didn't know was missing. Dr. Joyce helped me work through them slowly, teaching me breathing exercises when they got too intense. Meanwhile, Tariq had been digging into our mother's background and discovered she'd been seeing the same psychiatrist for 20 years, taking medication for bipolar disorder the whole time. The psychiatrist couldn't share details, but confirmed she'd been a consistent patient since losing custody of Maria. Maria and I decided to start going to therapy together, to work through our shared trauma and figure out how to be sisters as adults. Our first joint session was rough, both of us crying about the 20 years stolen from us, the birthdays and graduations and regular Tuesday nights we never got to share. After a few weeks, my mother asked if she could meet with both of us to apologize properly, but only if Dr. Joyce was there for support. We agreed even though Maria wasn't ready to forgive anything yet. The meeting happened on a Thursday afternoon, and my mother looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. She took full responsibility for hurting us, for the lies, for choosing to keep me when I couldn't remember instead of fighting to get Maria back too. She pulled out a box of letters she'd written to Maria over the years but never sent, pages and pages of regret and sorrow, and wishing she could undo everything. Maria listened but kept her arms crossed, and when our mother asked for forgiveness, Maria just said she wasn't there yet and might never be. I understood completely and didn't push her to feel differently. Going back to work after all this felt impossible, because how do you focus on spreadsheets and meetings when your whole life history just changed? My boss noticed I was struggling and connected me with the Employee Assistance Program for extra support beyond Dr. Joyce. Samir kept checking on me every day, bringing me lunch when I forgot to eat, sitting with me when I needed to not be alone. Slowly, Maria and I started spending regular time together outside of therapy, getting coffee twice a week at first, then dinner on Fridays. We discovered weird little things we had in common, like how we both became graphic designers without knowing about each other, how we both hate olives but love olive oil, how we both tap our fingers the same way when we're thinking. Building our relationship felt like learning a new language, where we already knew half the words, but had to figure out how they fit together. Yasmin called the next week with a stack of paperwork thick enough to make my head spin. She spread everything across her conference table and walked us through each form we needed to file to legally recognize Maria as alive and correct the false death records from 20 years ago. The process would take months and cost thousands in court fees, but Maria deserved to have her identity back officially. We spent 3 hours signing documents and getting them notarized, while Yasmin explained that the state would probably fight us since they'd already paid out survivor benefits to our mother based on the false death certificate. Maria's hand shook as she signed her name over and over on forms that would prove she existed. I watched her struggle with the weight of having to legally prove she was alive when she'd been living in Portland this whole time. The bureaucracy felt cruel but necessary. 3 months passed with weekly meetings at Yasmin's office and twice-weekly dinners with Maria, where we slowly learned how to be sisters. She taught me Photoshop tricks during our Tuesday dinners at her favorite Thai place, while I helped her figure out how to invoice clients and track expenses for her freelance business. We developed this weird inside joke about fortune cookies always giving us the exact opposite advice we needed. Maria would crack hers open and read something like, "Patience brings rewards," right when she was ready to scream at the slow legal system. Mine would say, "Take bold action," when I was already overwhelmed with everything changing so fast. We started saving all the wrong fortunes in a jar she kept on her kitchen counter. My mother kept calling and texting, but I only answered once a month to tell her I was okay but needed space. She'd started seeing a new therapist twice a week, according to the receipts I saw when I stopped by to pick up more childhood photos for evidence. Maria wasn't ready to talk to her at all, and I respected that completely. Some wounds take longer to heal than others. Dr. Joyce helped me understand during our sessions that my brain had protected me the only way it knew how when I was 12. The memories were coming back now because I was strong enough to handle them. This made me feel less broken, and more like my mind had actually saved me when I needed saving most. Maria found a new apartment 15 minutes from mine in a better neighborhood with actual parking and windows that opened. We spent a whole weekend painting her living room this soft green color she loved and assembling furniture from 3 different stores. I brought over the houseplants I'd been propagating for her, and she hung up prints of her design work mixed with photos we'd been taking together. Her place started feeling like the safe space we both needed. The court date for the official records correction finally came after 4 months of waiting. The judge reviewed everything and declared Maria legally alive again, with barely any emotion like this happened every day. We celebrated that night with Samir and Layla and everyone else who'd helped us find the truth. The victory felt strange because Maria had always been alive, but now the government finally agreed she existed. I bought a leather journal and started writing down every memory that came back to me. Maria would add her own memories in purple pen next to mine in black. Some entries made us laugh, like the time we convinced our kindergarten teacher we could read each other's minds. Others made us cry, like remembering how she held my hand during our mother's worst episodes. The journal grew thicker each week as more pieces returned. 6 months after that first video call, I met my mother for dinner at a quiet restaurant where we only talked about safe topics like her garden and my work. She showed real change in how she respected my boundaries and didn't push for more than I could give. Maria still wouldn't see her, and our mother accepted that without argument, which felt like progress. We planned a trip to the Oregon coast because something told us we'd loved the beach as kids. The moment our feet hit the sand, this memory crashed over me of us building elaborate sandcastles with moats and bridges. We were maybe 7, and Maria made me promise we'd always protect each other no matter what. I remembered the exact words because we'd made it rhyme like a spell. We both started crying and hugging right there on the beach with strangers probably thinking we were crazy. Work got easier as my brain stopped fighting itself over the recovered memories. My boss even promoted me to senior analyst, and Maria surprised me with new business cards she'd designed with this subtle watercolor effect. Having her in my life filled this empty space I hadn't even known existed. Every Tuesday and Friday dinner added another layer to our rebuilt connection. We were creating new traditions to replace the 20 years of missed birthdays and holidays. The sister I'd forgotten was becoming the person I couldn't imagine living without. Dr. Joyce brought up family therapy with our mother during my next session, but I shook my head before she finished the sentence. Maria and I needed to build our own foundation first, without our mother's presence complicating things. We started meeting twice a week for joint sessions, where we worked through 20 years of separation and the trauma that caused it. Dr. Joyce guided us through exercises to rebuild trust and create new shared experiences. Maria brought photo albums from her foster families to one session, and we went through them page by page while I shared stories from the same years. The gaps in our lives started filling in slowly, as we learned who we'd become without each other. 8 months after that first video call, Maria started seeing someone she met at a design conference. She texted me his photo and asked if I wanted to meet him over dinner. I showed up early to the restaurant and waited by the door like some overprotective parent meeting their kid's first boyfriend. The guy turned out to be decent and clearly cared about Maria, which made me relax slightly. We started doing double dates with me and my partner every few weeks, and it felt like the normal sister stuff we'd missed. Maria would text me after their dates with updates, and I'd give advice even though my own dating history wasn't exactly stellar. A year after reconnecting, we decided to get tattoos together to mark our journey back to each other. Maria designed them herself with these connecting patterns that formed a complete image when we stood side by side. Mine had the word found worked into the design, while hers said remembered in the same style. The tattoo artist kept looking between us and saying how wild it was that we had the exact same pain tolerance and healing response. We sat there holding hands through the needlework, and I remembered that promise we'd made as kids about always protecting each other. Our first joint birthday party happened 14 months after reconnecting, and Maria insisted on planning everything. She rented out this small gallery space and invited people from both our lives to finally meet. Samir helped with decorations, while Layla made her famous cake that could feed 50 people. Watching Maria surrounded by friends who loved her made something inside me feel complete. Our mother sent flowers with a note saying she was thinking of us, but she respected our request not to attend. 2 weeks after the party, I got an unexpected call from a woman named Carol, who said she'd been Maria's foster mother during high school. She'd heard through social services that we'd reconnected and wanted to tell me about Maria's teenage years. Carol drove down from Seattle, and we met at a quiet coffee shop where she pulled out photos of Maria at 16, 17, 18. She told me how Maria never stopped believing I was out there somewhere even when therapists tried to convince her to let go. Carol had been the one who helped Maria get into design school and supported her search for me even when it seemed hopeless. I hugged this stranger who'd loved my sister when I couldn't and thanked her for keeping Maria's hope alive. 2 years after that first video call, our relationship felt as solid as if we'd never been apart. We had sister nights every Thursday where we'd watch terrible reality shows and eat takeout on Maria's couch. She borrowed my clothes even though her style was edgier than mine, and I stole her jewelry constantly. We learned how to argue about stupid things and make up within hours. The lost 20 years would always sting, but what we built in these 2 years was real and strong. Maria came up with the idea for a support group after we met another pair of separated siblings at a coffee shop who recognized us from a news article about our case. We started meeting monthly at the library with anyone who'd been separated from siblings through foster care, adoption, or family conflicts. Within 6 months, we had 15 regular members, and 3 other twin pairs had reconnected through our group. We created resource guides and helped people navigate the legal system to find their missing family members. Today, Maria is just my sister who sends me dumb memes at 2 in the morning and calls me crying when work stress gets too much. We're planning a trip to Europe next summer because her old diary mentioned it was something we'd dreamed about as kids. She found the diary in a box of things her last foster family had saved, and we spent a whole weekend reading entries from her teenage years. Our mother has been working with her own therapist and respecting every boundary we set, which slowly earned her limited access back into our lives. We have dinner with her once a month now, and she never pushes for more than we offer. Maria designed a website for our mother's garden club as a peace offering, and that small gesture meant everything. The 3 of us aren't fixed or healed completely, but we're all in better places than we ever thought possible after everything that happened. And that's the wrap-up for today. I always try to tuck a lesson inside the story, something you can actually use. Hopefully at least one part stuck with you. Subscribe if you want the next takeaway ready to go.